They called him the king of the city. Victor Harrington owned half the skyline, controlled more lives than he could count, and walked through the world like a man untouchable by consequence. In the gleaming glass tower that bore his name, hundreds worked in silent fear, knowing that one wrong move, one moment of weakness, could cost them everything. But power has a way of making men blind. And Victor never saw the quiet janitor mopping floors on the 42nd floor as anything more than part of the furniture. He never imagined that Marcus Chen, the single father who worked 3 jobs to keep his daughter in school, would be the one to bring his empire crashing down. Some say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what Marcus served was calculated, precise, and absolutely devastating. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice and retribution, I want to invite you to join our community here at Revenge Unleashed. If you love stories about ordinary people standing up against injustice and finding their power when the odds seem impossible, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like on this video and tell us in the comments about a time when you had to stand up for yourself or someone you loved. Your stories inspire us to keep bringing you these powerful tales of courage and consequence. Marcus Chen had been invisible for most of his adult life, and he preferred it that way. At 52 years old, he had learned that invisibility was a superpower when you worked in places where the powerful gathered. He had been cleaning offices in Harrington Tower for 7 years, always arriving after the executives left, always gone before they returned. His hands were rough from chemicals and hard work, his back ached from pushing heavy equipment, but every paycheck meant his daughter Sarah could stay in college, could chase the dreams he never had the chance to pursue. Sarah was everything to Marcus. After her mother died when Sarah was just 10, Marcus had rebuilt his entire world around giving his daughter a future. He worked as a janitor at night, drove for a ride-share service in the early mornings, and did handyman work on weekends. He slept 4 hours a night and never complained. Sarah was thriving at Columbia University, studying engineering, making him proud in ways that brought tears to his eyes when he thought about it during those long night shifts. Victor Harrington knew none of this, and he would not have cared if he did. Victor had inherited his father's real estate empire and multiplied it tenfold through ruthless business practices that pushed legal boundaries and crushed anyone who stood in his way. He collected expensive cars, dated models and actresses, and treated his employees like disposable resources. His executive team lived in constant anxiety, knowing that Victor's temper could end careers on a whim. The stories were legendary. A senior VP fired during a board meeting for wearing the wrong tie. An accountant terminated because Victor did not like how she said good morning. A junior analyst whose life savings were destroyed when Victor manipulated stock options just to teach him a lesson about loyalty. The system that would eventually lead to Victor's downfall began innocently enough. Marcus had always been observant. During his years in the tower, he had developed an almost photographic memory for patterns and details. He noticed which executives left documents on their desks, which ones had sloppy digital security, who spoke too freely during late-night phone calls they assumed no one could hear. He never thought much about it until the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday in October when Marcus arrived for his shift and found Sarah waiting in the lobby, her face streaked with tears. His heart stopped. Sarah never came to his workplace. She was supposed to be in class. The moment he saw her expression, he knew something terrible had happened. The story tumbled out between sobs. Sarah had been offered an internship at Harrington Development Corporation, Victor's construction and property management subsidiary. It was a dream opportunity, the kind that could launch her entire career. She had worked there for 3 months, excelling at every task, earning praise from her immediate supervisors. Then Victor himself had taken notice of her. The brilliant young intern with the bright smile and sharp mind. Marcus felt sick as Sarah described what happened next. Victor had invited her to a private dinner under the guise of discussing her future with the company. She had been honored, excited. But the dinner turned predatory. Victor made his intentions clear. He expected certain favors in exchange for the recommendation letters and career advancement he could provide. When Sarah firmly refused and tried to leave, Victor smiled coldly and told her she had made a serious mistake. The next day, Sarah was fired for allegedly falsifying her timesheet records. But Victor did not stop there. He made calls. Used his connections. Sarah found herself blacklisted from every major internship program in the city. Worse, Victor had his lawyers send a letter threatening to pursue criminal charges for the timesheet fraud he had fabricated. The legal fees alone would bankrupt Marcus. The criminal record would destroy Sarah's future before it began. Marcus held his daughter as she cried, and something fundamental shifted inside him. For 7 years, he had been invisible by choice, observing a world that did not see him. Now he understood that invisibility was not just a survival mechanism. It was a weapon. And he knew things about Victor Harrington and his empire that no one else did. The plan took shape slowly over the following weeks. Marcus did not want simple revenge. He wanted justice. He wanted Victor to experience the same helplessness, the same fear, the same destruction of everything he held dear. And Marcus had tools that Victor never suspected existed. During his years cleaning offices, Marcus had observed that the truly powerful were often the most careless about security. They believed their position protected them, that their money insulated them from consequences. Marcus had seen executives leave passwords on sticky notes, had overheard conference calls about questionable business deals, had found documents in trash cans that should have been shredded. He had never acted on any of it because it was not his business. Until Victor made it personal. Marcus started with research. He began documenting everything methodically. He invested in a small digital recorder and started capturing conversations. He photographed documents before emptying trash cans. He logged the comings and goings of executives, noting patterns that suggested activities Victor would not want exposed. He worked his regular cleaning schedule but now with purpose and precision. What Marcus discovered was breathtaking in its scope. Victor's empire was built on a foundation of fraud, intimidation, and illegal activity. There were construction projects using substandard materials while billing for premium work. There were bribes paid to city officials to secure zoning changes. There were employees forced to sign NDAs after being sexually harassed, paid off to keep silent. There were tax fraud schemes involving shell companies in 3 countries. There were pension funds being quietly drained to fund Victor's personal expenditures. But Marcus knew that simple evidence was not enough. Victor had lawyers, fixers, people who specialized in making problems disappear. Marcus needed to create a situation where the evidence could not be buried, where Victor's own arrogance would be his downfall. The first phase of Marcus's plan involved establishing connections. He reached out to a journalist named Rebecca Torres who had tried to investigate Victor years earlier but could not get sources to talk. Using an anonymous email account, Marcus began feeding her verifiable information, small pieces that she could confirm independently. He built her trust slowly, proving that his information was solid. Rebecca was brilliant and hungry for the truth. She began her own investigation, using Marcus's intelligence to know exactly where to look. Simultaneously, Marcus contacted the SEC, the IRS, and the FBI through anonymous tip lines, providing specific details about Victor's financial crimes. He knew that government bureaucracies moved slowly, but he also knew that with enough specific evidence, they would eventually act. He gave them roadmaps to follow, breadcrumbs that would lead investigators exactly where they needed to go. The second phase was more personal. Marcus learned that Victor was planning a massive new development project, a billion-dollar deal that would reshape an entire neighborhood. The project required city council approval and depended on Victor's carefully cultivated image as a legitimate businessman and philanthropist. Marcus began leaking information to community organizations about how the project would actually involve displacing hundreds of low-income families, about the environmental corners Victor planned to cut, about the bribes already promised to ensure approval. Grassroots opposition began to organize. Community leaders who had been ignored suddenly had ammunition. Rebecca's preliminary articles started appearing, raising questions that made city council members nervous. Victor found himself facing unexpected resistance, his smooth path suddenly filled with obstacles. The third phase was the masterstroke. Marcus discovered that Victor kept a personal server in his private office, a server that contained the most damaging information, the details of deals that Victor could not risk storing anywhere else. The server was protected by biometric security and encryption, essentially impenetrable. Except Marcus had observed the security company that maintained it, had befriended the technician who serviced it, had learned the backup protocols. On a carefully chosen night when Victor was out of the country on business, Marcus executed his plan. Using knowledge gained from months of observation, he accessed the server room during his regular cleaning schedule. The backup system that was supposed to be secure had a flaw the technician had mentioned during a casual conversation. Marcus exploited it, copying terabytes of data onto encrypted drives. It took hours, but Marcus had all night, and no one noticed the janitor working late. The data was everything Marcus hoped for and more. Emails detailing bribes and threats. Financial records proving massive fraud. Videos from Victor's own security cameras showing him engaging in activities that would destroy his reputation and freedom. Communications proving he had knowingly endangered workers and residents to save money. Evidence of a pattern of sexual harassment spanning decades. Marcus did not release everything at once. That would allow Victor's team to craft a narrative, to spin and deflect. Instead, Marcus orchestrated a cascade. He provided different pieces of evidence to different entities, all timed to create maximum impact. Rebecca's major investigative piece published on a Monday, detailing financial fraud with irrefutable documentation. On Tuesday, the SEC announced a formal investigation. On Wednesday, community organizations held a massive press conference with evidence of the development project's deception. On Thursday, the FBI raided Harrington Tower, executing search warrants based on evidence of racketeering. By Friday, Victor Harrington's world was in free fall. His stock price collapsed. Business partners fled. City officials who had been in his pocket suddenly could not remember his name. His lawyers worked frantically, but the evidence was too substantial, from too many sources, and it kept coming. Victor's response was predictable. He tried to threaten, to intimidate, to buy his way out. But Marcus had anticipated this. Every move Victor made was documented and leaked. Every attempt to suppress information backfired, creating new scandals. Victor was used to controlling narratives, but now he was drowning in a flood of his own wrongdoing. The revelation that broke Victor completely came from an unexpected source. One of the employees he had silenced with an NDA years ago, emboldened by the cascade of revelations, came forward with her own story. Then another. Then a dozen more. The #MeToo movement had taught the world that when one voice speaks, others find courage. The stories were horrific and heartbreaking, and they painted a picture of a man who had used power as a weapon for decades. Marcus watched it all unfold while maintaining his invisible routine. He still mopped floors, still emptied trash cans, still arrived after everyone left. But now he did it with quiet satisfaction, knowing that justice was finally being served. The legal consequences for Victor were severe. Federal charges for fraud, racketeering, and tax evasion carried decades of prison time. Civil lawsuits from victims and investors would strip away whatever assets the government did not seize. But perhaps the worst punishment for a man like Victor was the complete destruction of his reputation and power. He went from feared titan to disgraced criminal. From untouchable to utterly powerless. Sarah's false charges were dropped immediately once Victor's pattern of retaliation became public. The blacklist evaporated. Universities and companies that had closed doors suddenly reopened them, embarrassed by their complicity. Sarah received multiple internship offers and eventually accepted one at a firm that valued integrity and talent. Marcus never revealed his role. Rebecca's articles credited anonymous sources and whistleblowers. The government investigations relied on tips that could not be traced. The community organizations believed they had organized themselves. Only Marcus knew the full scope of what he had orchestrated, and he preferred it that way. One evening, months after Victor's empire had crumbled, Marcus was cleaning the executive floor of the tower, which now housed new management. He found Sarah waiting by the elevators, having stopped by to surprise him after a successful day at her new internship. They rode down together, father and daughter, and as they walked out into the night air, Sarah asked him how he stayed so positive through everything that had happened. Marcus smiled and told her that he had learned something important over the years. The powerful believe they are untouchable because no one challenges them. They stop seeing the people around them as human beings with agency and intelligence. They forget that everyone has power, even those who seem powerless. Especially those who seem powerless. Because invisibility, he told her, can be the greatest power of all when wielded with patience and purpose. The story of how Victor Harrington fell became legend in the city, a reminder that justice sometimes arrives from unexpected places. People speculated about who had orchestrated the downfall, about how so much evidence had surfaced so perfectly timed. But no one suspected the quiet janitor who still worked night shifts, who still lived modestly, who still took pride in doing his job well. Marcus had never wanted to be a hero or to be recognized for what he had done. He had wanted his daughter to have her future back and for a dangerous man to face consequences. He had achieved both. And in doing so, he had proven something profound about the nature of power and justice in America. You do not need wealth or position or connections to stand up against injustice. You need courage, patience, and the willingness to act when action is required. You need to see what others overlook and to understand that every person, regardless of their station in life, has the capacity to change the world. As you reflect on this story, ask yourself what it means to truly have power. Think about the people in your own life who work quietly, who serve without recognition, who observe without being seen. Consider how quickly the mighty can fall when their own corruption becomes their undoing. And remember that justice, real justice, often comes not from the systems designed to provide it, but from ordinary people who refuse to accept that wrongdoing should go unchallenged. Marcus Chin proved that one person, armed with truth and determination, can topple an empire. And that is a lesson worth remembering every single day.